Okay, I'm just going to do some basic constructions here. Well, not constructions, but some basic graphing here. And so just to show you some things here, I have the y equals menu open here. And I'm just going to show you here how to get started here. So suppose I had a graph here and I want to do, well, I'll make up one here and just say x squared. Okay, so it's x squared. And I'm going to make it x squared minus 2. And that's my first graph. Okay. Well, I'm going to hit enter, and there's my graph. Now, if I hit graph now, hopefully this thing comes up here, and we can see what it looks like. There we go. And it's going to cut through here. And you can see it right here. Okay, I'm actually going to go to large screen. There we go. So it looks something like this. Now, you can see that it's cutting right here and right here on the axis. Now, if I want to know where it's cutting on the y-axis, well, I can actually see that pretty clear as day. And even from the formula, that has to be -2. I can do that very quickly just by putting 0 in for x, and I get -2. But even if I didn't know that, suppose I want to find out what is that 0 right there? Where does it intersect right here? What I can do is I can go back to my graph. Okay, I'm going to make a second graph on here. So I'm going to go down here. And my second graph, I'm going to make basically y equals 0. And if you recall, that's basically just the x-axis. Now if I graph this, you're going to see that line come in red right here. Okay, so there's y equals 0. Here's my other graph of x squared minus 2. What I can do now is I can go to right above table. Okay, right above table is a button. I'm going to use second function called calculate. So if I click on that, it gives me a couple options here. And one of the things that it does give me is intersect. So I'm going to scroll down to intersect here and hit enter. And you'll notice the first thing it says first curve. In other words, it wants to know which graph I'm referring to. And so it might seem weird, but we have two graphs on here, so they just call them all curves. So I'm going to pick the first one there, which is already on there, the blue one. I'm going to hit enter. The second curve that it's going to do, well, it's already starting to highlight it, but it's the red one. And so that's what I want. And so now it's basically picked both graphs. And then they asked me to take a guess. And the guess just basically says, you can see that it's cutting twice. There's two intersections. So it just wants me to pick as close as possible. So I just kind of scroll over, pick as close as possible, and just hit enter. And the value that I got here is x is -1.4 and y is equal to 0. Now, in fact, this ends up going on forever. The reason being is because where this is 0 will be the root of 2, plus or minus the root of 2. Of course, I could check the other one. I'll just show you how I do that again. If I go to second function, calculate, and I scroll down to what is called intersection, hit enter. It says first curve. I'm just going to hit enter because I know it's the blue one. Second curve, the red. You can see it's even highlighted here. Hit enter. And my guess is not going to be there anymore. Now I'm going to scroll over till about there. Hit enter. And there we go. It gives me the positive value. And so I can get intersections very, very quickly. Suppose I wanted this minimum here, though, and I want to know what that value is. I could, again, go to second function, calculate, and notice that one of the options here is minimum. And of course, you're probably seeing maximum right away too, but minimum I can go to right away. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit enter. And what it asks me is left bound. And what that means is it wants to know where is the left side of that minimum. So I'm just going to go right over here, just so it's just on the left of that minimum value, and just hit enter here. And now it says right bound, so I'm going to go scroll over. It's on the right side of it, and I say, yep. And guess, this part doesn't really, it's not that important, but I'm going to guess right about there is my minimum. And now it calculates it, and it says, oh, at x equals 0 and y equals -2 is my minimum, which of course is my y-intercept as well. It's kind of useful. You can see here that I got several values here. I could get relative max, relative min, absolute max, just by using that function of under calculate. One last feature here I'm going to show you here is value. All that does, if I can select it, is it simply says, you know, when x equals 8, I wonder what y is. So if I click that and I hit enter, it says, oh, by the way, y will equal 62. It's kind of useful to just say, you know, when x equals 1,000, what is it? It does this calculation for you, even though you could plug this in. So very useful. And one last thing here I could show you is zeros. And if I click that, a zero here essentially is the same thing as what we did before. Okay, it's a very similar thing. Um, they want to know here, the left bound and right bound is a little bit more tricky. I'll talk more about zeros in class, but for now you can basically do all those functions that we were talking about with that calculator menu. It's really quite useful.